Okay, hey, I'm going to help you out with your homework for tonight. It's basically what this problem is asking you to do. If we read out of the textbook, what it says is find the cosine. Okay, so it wants to find the cosine of the sum of a cosine, which is s plus t, and find using the differences of cosine. So cosine is s minus t. So what it wants you to do is to find those. Okay, so it wants you to actually calculate values for those given a set of certain functions. So here we go. What it wants you to note here is that the sine of the angle s is already going to be 2/3, and it tells you the sine of angle t is already going to be negative 1/3. So furthermore, it begins to tell you that s, okay, the angle s, whatever it is in quadrant 2. Which makes sense because if sine is in quadrant 2, it means its output is positive, which matches here. So that works out nicely. And then t, sine of t, okay, so the actual angle t, while we don't know what it is, the actual angle t is going to be in the fourth quadrant, which also makes sense because in the fourth quadrant, sine is negative. So that's why if I took a sine of some angle, which I don't know what it is, all I know is that its output, its y-coordinate, is going to be negative 1/3. So this goes back to figuring out how am I going to find the cosine of s plus t. So that's the first direction here. And the cosine of s plus t is the formula for the sum of a cosines is cosine of s times the cosine of t minus the sine of s times the sine of t. So what they give me here is they give me the cosine of s and they give me the sine of they give me the sine of s and they give me the sine of t, but they don't give me the cosine of s and they don't give me the cosine of t. So basing this off of our original problems at the beginning of the year where we had sine of theta was y over r and cosine of theta is x over r for some angle of theta. And what we talked about here was that that angle theta would be the same. So up here, what I can do is I can take a look at this and say that, okay, cosine of s, so for this particular function, for sine of s, I know that y, that is y over r, so therefore in this particular function, I've got, that for this one here, I've got, that's 2, and then r is 3. So now that I have y is 2 and r is 3, it all is based back to this formula. R squared equals x squared plus y squared, and what you need to solve for here is x, because if I had x, remember cosine theta is x over r. So this particular problem, I fill in what I have, so this is 3 squared, which is 9, x squared, that's what I'm trying to find, plus, so this one here is y squared, so y is 2, so 2 squared is 4, so that's why I get plus 4. So now I'm just solving for x, so I subtract 4, and I get x squared equals 5. So now I take the square root. So the square root of 5, the square root, and I get x is equivalent to plus or minus the square root of 5. Now here, this is when that given information up here is important, because s is in quadrant 2. Since I'm finding, okay, the cosine of s, what you need to remember is that x, okay, in this function for the cosine, theta is going to be this value over r. So cosine of s, okay, is this x value plus or minus root 5 all over r. And r in this case was 3. Okay, so it's just the same thing you've done in the beginning of the year, and it's just looping right back around. We're doing the same thing over and over and over again. So now the question is, what quadrant am I in? So the cosine of s, since I'm in quadrant 2, s, the angle s is in quadrant 2. It has to be just strictly negative because cosine in quadrant 2 is negative. It is not positive. So cosine of s is negative 5 over 3. So I do the same exact process for the cosine of t, except now I am not using sine of 2/3. I am using sine of negative 1/3. So I go through the same exact process, and that process is here. So I now have cosine of s. Okay, I've got sine of s, which is good. So I've got this, and I've got that. So all I need to find is the cosine of t. So the way I go ahead and go through that is I use this. So this is y, this is r. So I redo this again. R squared equals x squared plus y squared. And I plug it in now for this one. So when I plug in what I have, so this is y and that's r. So it doesn't matter which one I make negative because I'm squaring it. So in this case, r squared, I could say that that's 9 equals, so x squared is just the x squared. And the whole reason I'm finding x squared is because I need to find cosine of t, and cosine of theta is x over r. So now I come back to this plus, so negative 1 squared is 1. So now I've got the square root. So now I subtract 1, I've got 8 equals x squared. So then to finish this up, I take the square root, and when I reduce the square root of 8, it is 4 times 2, so I get 2 root 2 is equivalent to x. So some basic algebra 2 skills there for reducing a square root. So now that I have that, I can say that the cosine of t is equivalent to 2 root 2 all over the 3. So now the question is, cosine of t, the angle t, this angle t is in quadrant 4, so I'm going to leave this one positive. I am not going to make it negative. And the whole reason for that is because t is in the 4th quadrant. So there's all the work for this. I'm going to erase it in a second just so I can keep this all on one screenshot for you. But basically the point is you're utilizing the formula r squared equals x squared plus y squared, which is the formula for a circle. So here we go. Let me erase this so I can finish off this problem so I can answer it. So I now have everything I need. I don't need this anymore. I don't need this anymore. I've got my cosines, I've got my sines, and all I am now going to do is plug them into my formula. So cosine of s, so the cosine of s is negative root 5 over 3. So negative root 5 over 3, that quantity, times the cosine of t, and the cosine of t was 2 root 2 over 3. So that's 2 root 2 over 3. And then I'm going to continue on with this, and I'm going to subtract from that. So the sine of s was 2/3 times the quantity of the sine of t, and the sine of t was negative 1/3. So all I'm going to do now is go through and simplify this. So negative 5 times 2, which is negative 2 root 10, all over 3 times 3, which is 9, some basic algebra 1 and pre-algebra skills, multiplying fractions, minus, so it actually becomes positive because the negative and the negative makes that a positive, 2 over 9. So now it just comes back to simplifying this a little bit more. So this becomes, since they're like denominators, I can write their numerators all over one fraction. So the final answer here is negative 2 root 10 plus 2 all over 9. So likewise, to finish this off, if I wanted to, okay, the only difference between the plus and the minus is going to be is that for the plus, since it's a minus, the only difference is I'm going to put a plus. This is a minus. This is a minus, and that's a plus. So for this one, I would add a plus, which is going to make this a minus. So the difference between the two, when I go through and do this, for the cosine of this one, it's done the same exact way, except that sign there is different. So at the end, this should be a minus. So that's how you do those problems. So I hope that helps with your 2 homework problems that I gave you for tonight. So good luck.